Sergeant Kevin Artz. I am neither a psychologist nor a psychiatrist, but I know that conventional mental health science agrees in principle that the male brain is not fully developed until about 25 years of age. Women develop several years earlier and seem to stay developed a whole lot longer, although that is just my perception and not based on any scientific study. So at 22 years old, a man is still developing, impressionable in his view of the world and the experiences he encounters. In the summer of 1987, I was 22 years old and finishing my final semester of college. I'd stayed in Terre, Haute, Indiana, at Indiana State University for the summer to complete my internship and a couple of miscellaneous classes to earn my bachelor's degree. The internship was part of the criminology program that's designed to provide practical experience in our criminology field of choice and included 200 hours of work split into the law enforcement and corrections field. I was offered the opportunity to do my internship with the Vigo County Sheriff's Office, which had jurisdiction in Vigo County in Terre Haute, Indiana. Convenient for me because I could do all 200 hours with the Sheriff's Department and close by to campus, all to be done in time for me to qualify for my diploma by the end of the summer session. Though this is not a story about me, it does involve me. This story is about Sergeant Walter Kevin Artz. But actually, if you will allow me the indulgence, let's call this our story, because I believe it is fair to say that Sergeant Artz had a large impact on my life and most everything to come afterwards. On July 1st, 1987, while responding to a domestic disturbance on the north end of Terre Haute, Sergeant Artz was shot and killed by an assailant who ambushed him as he attempted to talk to the subject. It was a traumatic event for the Vigo County Sheriff's Department, the entire law enforcement community in the Wabash River Valley, and its residents. And of course, life-changing and devastating for his young wife and two very young daughters. Also traumatic for a 22-year-old intern who was on the scene. Yep, I was there on that warm July evening, and this is the story of that incident. Welcome back to the Detective Story Podcast. I am Mike Hammond. We appreciate your attention and your continued great support. We really do. It means a lot to us. And please, if you're enjoying the show, download it, like, subscribe, give us a review, all those things. It really does help. And share it with your family and anyone else you think may be interested. Please keep in mind the subject matter of this podcast is of a violent nature. We discuss violent death, murder, and a host of traumatic circumstances. If you're sensitive to that type of thing or that type of discussion, please proceed cautiously. So, listen, I scripted out the intro to this. I do a lot of scripting with this podcast. I'm in this middle ground of learning to be new at this and how much should be scripted and how much should be off the cuff. I find, although I've testified in front of hundreds of juries and grand juries and judges, that done a lot of public speaking, but it's a whole different issue sitting here by myself talking to a camera and irritated with myself as I would have on the stand had I said a lot, which I find myself doing here. So I script a lot of this to make sure I get the information in there that I want to get in there, and for dramatic license a little bit, although I always try and stick to the facts, but when I script it, it tends to sound a little better, I think, in general. This one, though, I think I'm just going to tell you the story. People really close to me know the story. It's not something I go around talking about a whole lot, but something that I want to discuss here for a couple of reasons. One, Sergeant Kevin Artz, his name's Walter Kevin Artz, but everybody knew him as Kevin. I knew for a very brief time. In the summer of 1987, as I said in the intro, I was trying to finish up my bachelor's degree at Indiana State. I'm a proud tree, Sycamore. Post Larry Bird, a little older than me, several years older than me. But I'd gotten at Indiana State in the golden age, just after the golden age of athletics. Larry Bird had been there, Bruce Baumgartner, America's most decorated wrestler at the time, Kirk Thomas, a world champion gymnast who missed his opportunity to compete in the Olympics because of the boycott in 1980. We just had a plethora of a women's gymnastics team that was awesome. I think a women's national swimming championship. Indiana State was a great school. It is a great school. I'm very proud of graduating from there, and the criminology program was outstanding. I enjoyed my time there a great deal. And I have to be honest, at going into the summer of 1987, as I sit here now in front of you, after this great experience I've had on the Chicago Police Department that I'm excited to have had, proud to have had, I think back about that 22-year-old kid, and I think, very frankly, I didn't know shit from a hand grenade. A lot of 22-year-olds don't, right? I mean, especially boys, as science will tell you. So I'm sailing along, busy bartending on my side time, taking full load of classes, finally figuring out what it was to be a student and study. Part of a really good criminology program there. My counselor was a professor by the name of William Nardini, who we've lost. But Dr. Nardini was a character in himself, outstanding professor. He was a trained polygraph examiner. He would not at all like to hear my take on polygraphs a lot these days. It's not, again, I've talked about that in other episodes. I don't discount them. It's an interesting concept in general to me. But he was a tough professor, but he was fair and he was a good man. And me and several of my roommates and friends that were part of the criminology program, he was good to us and liked us quite a bit. So that summer, I have to do my internship, which accounted for, I believe, 12 hours. And I was 18 hours short going into that summer. So I had to take 2 classes in this internship. And again, I was working bartending. But he came to me and another intern who I haven't been able to get a hold of. So as you know from my previous episodes, I don't use people's names unless I've had the chance to talk to them, use it and have their permission, or they exist on, police reports, or they're deceased, or, something of that nature. But I haven't been able to get a hold of the other intern. The point to that is Dr. Nardini came to us and said for the first time in, I don't know, about a dozen years, the sheriff, who at the time was Jim Jenkins, the Vigo County Sheriff, had opened up the sheriff's department for 2 internships. And Dr. Nardini asked me and this other intern if we'd be willing to do it, which coming from Dr. Nardini was quite a compliment that I felt, frankly, a little bit unworthy of, because I kind of sailed through college just enjoying myself and, applying myself when I was interested and getting by. But we agreed to it. It was convenient for me, certainly, because I could stay there in Terre Haute. I could do, both. It was 200 hours, I believe, and you had to do 100 in law enforcement, 100 corrections. I could do them both with the sheriff's department, as I described. So, it really worked out great. And the sheriff's department took me and this other intern in really well. Sheriff Jenkins didn't have a lot of interaction with him, but he was certainly inviting and cordial to us. Also disciplined, the rules were the rules. We had to represent the sheriff's department, which was good, I think, for us to hear, positive way. And I got, introduced to some really interesting people. Among them were Sergeant Artz, who was most tours that I worked were on the afternoon watch, which is 3 to 11, depends on where you're at. Chicago Police Department, it rotates 3 to 11, 4 to midnight, 5 to 1. I mean, it staggers. Used to. Right now, I have no idea what it is. It's changed up a lot. We used to work 6-day work weeks, which they no longer do, thankfully. But in Terre Haute at the time, it was basically, I think there was a 3 to 11 and a 4 to midnight maybe, but there weren't a lot of deputies on the street at one time. It's not a big sheriff's department. Terre Haute's a city of about, I don't know, short of 60,000 people, right at 60,000. The mayor probably yell at me if I've got that wrong, but I think that's about right. I was born actually in Terre Haute, Indiana in 1965. So there you go. I dated myself exactly. And at that time, Terre Haute was a pretty bustling city, a lot of industry, a lot of factories there. There's a lot going on, but that kind of faded with the Rust Belt years, and in the 70s, that a lot of those factories moved out and the population declined severely. I think at one time, the population might have been close to 100,000 people. Terre Haute it's a good town. It's a good city. It's had a reputation as being a rough city at times. Used to be a big biker city, and law enforcement has their hands full there, and they always have. I think now it's a lot of places it's calmed down, but still has its issues. There was a Terre Haute detective assassinated right outside of the office there. I was working on a federal task force just about 2 years ago. And forgive me, I don't have his name in front of me. That's part of being unscripted here, but I will have that. at least in the liner notes, but their challenges remain. But in 1987, they had not had a policeman killed in Terre, Haute, or Vigo County in 30 years, I believe. And somebody will correct me on that again, but it had been a long time. So we got assigned to two particular deputies, the other intern and I. And the deputy that I got assigned to didn't ride with him every single day because it depended on his schedule and what days that I was scheduled to ride along. But the deputy that I rode with a lot, his name was Michael McKissick. And Michael and his legacy has played an integral part of who I am and my career, and I'll explain that to you as I go on. But Mike was a member of the United States Army, 101st Airborne. He was in Vietnam, did a couple tours in Vietnam. He'd been a Terre Haute city policeman before he got in the sheriff's department. He was a stern guy, but fair. And after he got to know him, he was open and really informative and could tell that I was interested in wanting to do the right thing. And I started this internship in June-ish, I believe, right at the end of the school year. And, I was terrified because, I'd never, been riding around acting like a policeman. I mean, I wasn't actually acting like a policeman. I was sitting beside Mike doing exactly as he told me to do. But, every time we'd stop a car, we get a call to go to, every single one to me was like, wow, what's going to happen here? This is amazing. These men and women do this all the time, That didn't last very long. It made me feel comfortable, and I got kind of used to it. And it became enjoyable and fun. And I enjoyed riding with Mike and Sergeant Artz and the other deputies. Again, I spoke to them, so I'm not going to mention names. So staying along, the summer's going really good. It's a good summer. Staying with one of my closest friends, still a close friend by the name of Brian Liturgy. And Brian, superstar athlete, member of Indiana State's Sports Hall of Fame. As a track athlete, he qualified for the Olympic trials in the 400 hurdles my senior year. And then after he didn't make the Olympic team in the 400 hurdles, but he got asked to try out for the United States bobsled team, which he did, and he went on to compete in 3 Winter Olympics as a part of the U.S. bobsled team. And Brian and I are still close friends. And that summer I was living with him. We were sharing an apartment on the south end of kind of along Fraternity Row, what used to be Fraternity Row there in Terre Haute. And we were bartending at the same place. So we had this kind of symbiotic lifestyle where we're passing each other, between classes, between his workouts, between me going to work and the internship. And that is important in a lot of reasons, I think, because Brian's still one of my best friends to this day. He knows this story probably as well as anybody. And he was there, as this progressed. So we're riding along, and Mike McKissick is doing, in retrospect, a really great job of teaching me what it is to be a good policeman. And on July 1st of 1987 is a warm July evening, and it's just another kind of regular day. I do recall, now I tried to reach out to Sergeant Artz's daughters. I just couldn't get in touch with them. If they hear this, I'd love to hear from you. I also tried to reach out to the Vigo County Sheriff's Department, to be fair. I talked to several people, but not anybody in an official capacity. So they bear no responsibility for anything I'm saying here. And if I get anything wrong, I hope, that's on me, and my apologies ahead of time. They bear no responsibility at all. July 1st, 1987, we usually had, I don't recall the number, but I think maybe a lieutenant, a couple of sergeants, and then maybe 4, 5, maybe even 6 deputies on the street for the whole county. Those numbers, again, it's a long time ago. I could be off on that, but that's my recollection. All of this is my recollection. This was 37 years ago, so bear with me, please. That evening, we were a little short because we had a couple of regular deputies that were off. I think one was attending a DUI convention, if my memory serves right. One might have been on furlough or vacation. But in general, it was Sergeant Artz was our watch commander that I recall. It may have been a lieutenant working. I just don't recall that. I'm sorry. And then the other deputy, the other intern was working, and Mike McKissick and I don't recall if there was another deputy on the street that night or not. My apologies. But so we go, we're doing our thing fairly early in the evening. It was still daylight out. I believe it was around 6 p.m. in that issue. I don't recall. Purposely doing this by my memory and tried not to go back into it too much in terms of research and that, because that's not what this story is really about, the details. But I know we were working the afternoon watch, and it was a couple hours into the tour at most. We got a call of a domestic disturbance on the north end of Terre Haute. And domestic disturbances are, I think almost everybody knows that they're a dangerous thing for law enforcement. And I've learned that lesson then and many times since. You have to take them all very seriously. So the call comes out of a domestic disturbance, and we proceed that way. Mike says, we should go. And he of course, he's driving. I'm never, interns don't drive squad cars. So we start heading that way, and Sergeant Artz gets on the air and says he's pretty close by. And the other deputy was with the other intern was even closer than us. And then the dispatcher comes back on the air and says the wife of the complainant, the wife who called the police, called back the second time and said that he had a gun this time. So now we pick up the pace. Sergeant Artz is close. He's going to wait for the second deputy to get there. The wife that had called 911, or the police back then, so long ago, I'm not sure 911 would have been the thing. But anyway, so now we're hustling. Mike tells me to turn the lights and sirens on. Cool thing for an intern, right? So we do that. We're flying over there. We get close. Mike tells me to shut them down. We do. So the house where this incident took place, well, it's a little difficult for me to describe to you. It was in a part of Terre Haute that it's not exactly run down, or I would not describe it, but solid lower middle class. It was mixed in with some kind of regular homes, and then there was the home of where this incident took place, which was really kind of a shack. It was tiny, maybe 500 or 600 square feet, the whole little house. And as Mike pulled us in, you could see Sergeant Artz's vehicle. The driveway went along, kind of alongside the house, and we could see Sergeant Artz's car kind of towards the back of the house, and then the other deputy, his vehicle close to Sergeant Artz towards the back. And notable to me at the time was the other intern was still inside of his vehicle, which, for better or worse, when you're a policeman and you've got interns and you're trying to give them a feel of what the job is like, you have to walk a very fine, careful line, because you want to give them the experience of what it's like, but you also, of course, want them to be safe. The last thing in the world that you want to have happen is something happen to an intern, right? So commonly, we'd get out and observe what was going on. And if it was something, we'd stay at a safe distance back, whatever. And I know law enforcement people out there, and especially my tactical friends, will, and I hope that this doesn't really get the sheriff of Vigo County sideways with me. I mean, this is 37 years ago now. They say, you should never do that. An intern should be at a safe place. Listen, I never felt unsafe with Mike McKissick. Not one time. I felt like I got an amazing, I can stop using that word every 10 minutes, but I got a great experience as an intern on what law enforcement was like. Of course, capped by a terrible incident in this one. So Mike pulls alongside to the side of the house, and before he gets out of the car, we can see Sergeant Artz walking up the steps to the back of the house, and the other deputy right behind him. And I don't know if it's an instinct or a feeling or just the nature of the call. I am a big instinct guy. I maybe Mike was too. He was a Vietnam vet. I'm not a military guy. I'm a college boy. But my life on the west side of Chicago, maybe it started actually July 1st, 1987. But I'm a guy that listens to that little voice in my head that says, "Ooh, watch out here," and maybe Mike was the same. Whatever it was, he told me, or maybe it's just the fact that he saw the other intern still in the car, and the nature of the call could have been that simple. But he told me, stay in the car, stay back here. And of course, I did exactly what Mike told me, always. And so Mike gets out, starts walking up, and this is my recollection. I couldn't hear the conversation, what was going on, because I'm probably, I don't know, it's hard to say, maybe 20 or 30 feet away in the car. The windows were cracked. Summer, like I said, it was warm, but I could hear Sergeant Artz talking, but couldn't really hear what he was saying. And then I heard a couple of pops, which were gunshots. I didn't identify him as that immediately, but I saw Sergeant Artz pull his weapon, kind of stumble, and fire his weapon back. He was left-handed, and he had a revolver, and a large revolver, and he pulled his revolver, and I remember him firing, and he kind of fell as he was firing, and the other deputy firing his weapon towards the house and the door. And I saw Sergeant Artz kind of fall over, and then the other deputy kind of back away as he's firing, and Mike take kind of a low crouching tactical position. And then it occurs to me what's going on. Like, this is like worst case scenario. And at some point, and I don't know exactly when here, I do recall Mike yelling back at me, "Get down, get down, get down." And as it turns out, Sergeant Artz crawled several feet, and his daughters hear this. This will be painful probably, but he's a brave man, and it's an incredible thing to see. And he crawled inside the house in what was a little safer position. And then the other deputy took a position behind his car, and Mike took a position back by our car. He told me, "Get down on the ground, get down on the ground." And he kept saying that to me, "Get down on the ground." And I'm telling you, like, I don't know how far you can get down into the ground, but I was looking up at the top of the grass, and I'm a pretty big guy. You didn't have to tell me multiple times. I understand why he did, but I was getting down. What I wanted to do was take off and run as far as I could. But again, that'd have been foolish in retrospect, right? Because we don't know what that guy inside is doing. If he's got a sniper rifle and he's looking for somebody, you just don't know. So that's what I was doing, hugging the dirt. And my recollection is this.
Hi, this is Mike Hammond. Let's take a moment from our regular programming for a real talk about safety and security. I want to introduce you to Blue Knight Security Solutions. Yep, Knight, like King Arthur's court. Your ultimate partner in protection. Blue Knight Security Solutions isn't just your average security company. They are a team of elite detectives, investigators, and law enforcement professionals with unparalleled expertise. Especially in this realm, I wouldn't vouch for just anyone, but I confidently endorse Blue Knight because I have seen their skills firsthand. Whether you need real-world investigative prowess or comprehensive security measures for your business, synagogue, church, school, or any gathering place you feel at risk, Blue Knight Security Solutions has you covered. From risk assessment to tailored security plans, they'll ensure your safety is priority number one. So, if you're in need of real safety, contact Blue Knight Security Solutions today at 773-706-4920 or visit BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com. Again, Knight like the round table, BlueKnightSecuritySolutions.com. Tell them I sent you.
My recollection is this. An off-duty state policeman who, for the life of me, his name I cannot come up with because I'd love to know where he is and how he's doing. But he was off-duty driving his state trooper vehicle, which is common for state troopers, I think, everywhere. I think he was filling it up with gas, and he hears this call come out, and he rushes to the scene. And this all happens in a matter of just minutes, but because pretty quickly it seemed like there were 100 police cars there. And I don't think there's 100 police cars in all of the Terre Haute area, but however many there were, they were there. But initially, this off-duty state trooper shows up, and he comes up by Mike. I actually think that state trooper told me, "Get down." I don't know how much more I could have got down. I mean, it's good advice. And I'm glad they, in retrospect, like, I'm glad they kept saying it, but like, it's totally unnecessary. I was down. I mean, I was getting down like James Brown. He had a brief conversation with Mike and then the other deputy who was going to cover them. And they went up and they grabbed Sergeant Artz and drug him back behind our squad car. And I saw it. So I got it right. I just caught myself in the trick bag. I wasn't staying totally down because when they said they were going to go up and get him, I guess I just had to see whatever. And pretty foolish because again, if he's in there with the rifle and he's any kind of shot at all, I'm easy at that point. But they ran up and they got Sergeant Artz through what was the line of fire as far as anybody knew. I don't know that was ever acknowledged. Maybe it was. I just never really heard it. I don't know that I ever said it to Mike. I'm talking about Mike here, as you can tell, quite a bit. And that's because Mike, unfortunately, we lost Mike in 1987. I'm just looking for my notes here. Pardon me, as I should have had these out. But so that's why I'm so freely talking about Mike McKissick. And I'm sorry that he's gone, but I'm glad that I can talk about him because he him and the other, the state trooper drug Sergeant Artz back behind our vehicle. And he told me, stay with him, stay down, stay with him. And then he took a tactical position again where they could see the house. And, again, it's so hard to remember, but my recollection is this. I was alone with Sergeant Artz for probably just a matter of moments, maybe seconds, because pretty quickly, as I said, policemen were flooding in from everywhere. And two very brave paramedics pulled up in an ambulance, was told where Sergeant Artz was, and were on him, cutting his clothes off, working on him just very, very quickly. And again, run right through what very likely was the line of fire, although we didn't hear any more shots, but just didn't know, all of it struck me as incredibly courageous. But I recall in those moments that I was alone, brief moments that I was alone with Sergeant Artz, I had been to wakes, funerals, and I'd seen dead bodies there, but I never had seen anybody, that gravely injured in front of me. And, I didn't know really what to say. I think I was mumbling, you're going to be okay. Or, I don't even remember really, but something probably super lame. And he could have talked, would have probably told me, just shut up, kid, and leave me alone. But, whatever. I was trying my best. And, so these paramedics are there. The other policemen come around, all of them, for me to get down. And so maybe I wasn't doing as good a job of getting down as my recollection is, But then they quickly took Sergeant Artz in the ambulance and got him out of there, And, in my kind of naivete or whatever, I thought, he's going to be okay. He's going to be okay. And then I'm just like staying down. And now we have probably a couple hours to go by the sheriff's out pretty quickly, and a lot of policemen, like I said. And then there's some discussion about, I think the Terre Haute Police Department SWAT team was training or something that day. I just don't recall, but there was some question as to whether they could muster or not and get there. And again, we have a armed offender barricaded in the home as we know it at the time. There was some talk they might try and get the Indianapolis SWAT team out there. I think they did reach out to them. Indianapolis, about 60 miles from Terre Haute. So you're probably talking an hour and a half for them to muster and then drive there even at, police speed to get there. But then the Terre Haute Police Department, I think their SWAT team, as it turns out, was available and got out there fairly quickly. Before they mustered to get ready to make entrance to the house, they got me, the other intern. They had enough squad cars in there. They got us back. And at that time now, the other intern and I had probably had 50 policemen screaming at us, get down, get down. Again, it's good advice. Nobody was more motivated to get down and get the hell out of there than I was. But right before I left, Mike, I caught his attention. He was locked in, as you would imagine. And I understand this keenly now, but he was locked in. All that time in Vietnam and all that time being a policeman, he was locked into what was going on around him. He wasn't conversating. But I caught his attention for a second, and I said, Mike, how's Sergeant Artz okay? And he didn't really even look at me in the way he said it. He wasn't cruel or mean or anything. I think it's just a man of his life experience told me he was dead when I got to him. I'm like, wow, okay. And he said, come on, kid, go. And so I went, and still having a hard time getting my head wrapped around that, So they got us back, pretty safe place. The SWAT team went in. We heard like the flashbangs. They were using flashbangs back then. Certainly they used tear gas into the house. And then they were yelling for him, trying to get him to negotiate, come out. And then they made entry. They found him. And as it turns out, the bad guy died of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. And they surmised that it happened pretty quickly after he had shot Sergeant Artz. Now, whether that's come from the coroner or the investigation, I just don't recall. But I do recall that fact coming out. And so that was that. I learned before we left the scene, there was a lot of conversation on the scene. There was a lot of scene investigation. I will tell you, unfortunately, I have been on the scene of many more policemen killed in the line of duty or died in the line of duty. I don't know the number. I'm not going to play that mental game to try and count them all. It's not like I saw 100, but there was many more. As homicide detective, unfortunately, it's part of it. And the scenes are critical and they take up a lot of time. And that's what happened in this case. As it turns out, the detective who we've also lost, his name was Artz. And it's an unusual name, right? But his important to me at the time because my father was really close friends with his brother. In fact, I think his brother used to work for my dad, and his brother owned a Kawasaki dealership. And we were big, like dirt bike riders when I was young. And so owning a Kawasaki dealership was like the coolest thing I could possibly imagine. So I think he may have been a lieutenant. He was also an investigator, Artz, and he was really good to me. He needed just the statement of what I saw. And when it boils down to just the investigation, it's pretty simple. It's a homicide suicide. It's just really, not to sound cold, but it's just really dotting the I's and crossing the T's and making sure that everything is accounted for and that there's nobody else that's culpable or any of that type of thing. It turns out this killer was, forgive me, but he was just a human zero. He kind of a lifetime of just being a jerk. He just, neighbors for years had complained about him drinking, about him pulling guns on people. He had a lot of police interaction. He'd done a little bit of time for shooting people. He just wasn't a great human being. And that's how he went out. And I do recall his name, but I'm not saying it here. So the investigation goes late into the evening. They finally cut me loose from the sheriff's office, very late into the morning. I don't recall now what time. It was still dark, but whatever. And so I go home. I'm staying with my buddy Brian, and I get him up and I tell him, and I talk to the other intern. We're just stunned. I don't know how else to describe it. Just horrified and stunned and numb. And so I go home. Brian's great, man. He's a good friend, and he sat up with me and talked about it, and acknowledged how rough it was and whatever. And so the next day, of course, it's all over the news. I talked to my mom and dad that night, and I'm sure they were very concerned. My dad sent one of my childhood buddies over to check on me. Mom and dad at that time lived outside of Indianapolis, and we all did actually. But that's what it was. The next morning, it's all over the news and newspapers, and it's a very traumatic event again for the whole city and the whole Wabash River Valley, as they call it. I was just didn't know what quite to do. I was laying around the apartment. I don't remember what I was scheduled to do that day, except I was scheduled to go back out and ride with do a ride along as part of the internship again. And I had no intention of doing that. Like I figured, they're not going to want me out there. There's going to be a lot to do or whatever. Whatever else I was doing, I just wasn't doing that day. I was kind of sitting on the couch trying to figure out. I mean, it's 1987, right? There's not a lot of support or mental health stuff, any of that. There's nobody to really talk to. There's nobody to reach out to. Friends, that's Brian was there. Dr. Nardini was great. I mean, he reached out and, asked if I was okay. It's 1987. That's what you did. How you doing? I think, okay. All right. Well, let me know if you need anything. That's kind of what it was. And that's a good thing. I mean, like now we think of that as pathetic and insufficient, but at the time, it was comforting and it was something there. But the important part of this story is about 3:00 in the afternoon. I was laying on the couch, probably kind of napping because I didn't get a lot of sleep. And Brian says, "Hey man, there's a sheriff's car out front." And so I got up and I thought, I probably need to talk to me some more, or about what happened. So I walk outside and I'm like in a t-shirt and shorts, and it's Mike McKissick. And he says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Nothing, nothing. What are you doing?" He goes, "I'm working." He said, "Why aren't you? You're supposed to be riding along tonight. What are you doing?" So I don't think so, Mike. Like I didn't think that they want me there tonight, and I really don't want to do that tonight. He goes, "No, man, you have to. Come on." He kind of gave me I don't think he said these words, but you got to get back on the horse type of speech. I really didn't want to do it, but he was insistent, and I kind of didn't want to let him down, and so I got dressed and I went with him, and I have been scared since. I'm not afraid to admit it. I have been shot at several times. I have fights to the death, literally. I have been scared. I don't recall ever being as terrified as I was that night riding with Mike. I mean, it was scary the night of the shooting, but that next night, it's hard to describe. We stopped made a couple travel. It was a light night. I mean, Mike wasn't really, looking to get into anything anyway. And there's a kind of a quiet calm that comes over a small community like that after I found out since after a policeman is killed. But so it wasn't a lot going on anyway. But, we saw a couple of people run red lights and things like that. We stopped them. I don't recall if we even wrote tickets or whatever. But every time I was absolutely terrified. I was convinced that everything we went to, somebody's going to shoot at us. But I got through it. He got me home and told me not to drink too much, and he told me there were better days. So, I kept going back and riding with him. The funeral was another amazing thing. Amazing, that word. I never seen a police funeral before, been a part of one, and it was awe-inspiring. The number of law enforcement officers that came to pay their respects. And in the years since, I know what it is. And I've been to way too many of them. I've been to my own friends. They are pomp and circumstance for a reason. It should be. It's a sacrifice. And his wife and his daughters, who were little bitty girls at the time. I think Ashley, the younger, was a baby, a newborn practically. And Lindsay wasn't much older. I don't recall now, but I don't think she was much more than 4 or 5. So that was a whole process for me to kind of take in as well. And, Sergeant Artz deserved all of that. He was a brave man who served that community exceptionally well for not very much money at all back in those days. Boy, policemen got paid very, very little. He left a wife and 2 young children behind, trying to make this community safer. And I can't think of too many things more noble than that. Again, I said this is about him. It is about him, but it's kind of my story. So I ride out the rest of the summer with Mike, the rest of my internship. I did the jail time. I can't remember which one I did first, the corrections or the ride-alongs with the deputies. But that was it. A kind of funny side note to that. I don't know, it's really that funny, but it struck me as humorous. Was Dr. Nardini, my counselor. He like I said, he's a good man. I liked him a lot. He's a tough guy. He was a little kind of built like a little wrestler, in good shape. And he was old enough to remember the cartoon Deputy Dog. He kind of laughed like Deputy Dog when he laughed. On the rare occasions he would laugh, he'd kind of like that with his shoulders up. He was a good man. And so I had to do a kind of thesis paper on my internship or kind of a summation report on my internship, which is the final part of the grade. And Dr. Nardini, as good a man as he was, as much I enjoyed taking his class, and he was tough grader. He was very tough, infamous for the scarcity of his A's, how many A's he gave out. But so I did my report on law enforcement line of duty deaths. And that, I researched it and got all the numbers of how they occur across the country on average, and the ages, and somewhere buried in all my stuff. I think I still have a copy of that report. I think it was in the library there for a while, but, and then I included, the story of Sergeant Artz and his sacrifice in that, and, so I go and see Dr. Nardini for my last day in Indiana State, and I'm done. Get my report. Frankly, I didn't really care. Like, after the summer I'd had and the loss of Sergeant Artz and all that, it didn't matter to me if he gave me a D. I just wanted to pass and get the grade and be done and have a diploma and kind of move on with my life, But I felt really good about that paper. I thought I'd done a good job on it. And also was kind of under the opinion that, like, not in an arrogant way, just in my kind of thought process, was if the goal of an internship is to get experience towards your real life career, I don't know how much real experience you can get than what me and this other intern got. So I wrote this paper. I was happy with it. I thought I'd done some of my best collegiate work in that paper, which wasn't a high bar, I got to admit, but still. So I go in and see Dr. Nardini, and really just to get the paper. And as long as he doesn't flunk me, I knew he wasn't going to do that. Then I was done. I'd met the requirements for my bachelor's degree. It's a good thing. But I walked into his office, and he gives me this really kind of great, unusual speech for him. He's like, It's been my pleasure to have you as a student. You've done a great job. I'm proud of you. I think you're going to go out and do great things. You represented the university, you and the other intern represented the university really well during this time. And I thought your paper was excellent. So good luck. If you ever need anything, I'm here for you. And he got up, shook my hand. He handed my paper, and I looked at it, and at the top in big letters, it said, excellent work. And underneath it said, B+. And I said, thank you very much, Dr. Nardini. I really appreciate it, and I walked out of there, and I had kind of a little bit of conflicting feelings, like the incredible relief of like, I've accomplished this. I'm done. I got a college degree, coupled with, man, what do you got to do to get an A with this guy? You know what I mean? And that's no shade on Dr. Nardini. I said, again, I don't care. He could have given me a D. I really don't care. But I just thought that was pretty funny, in retrospect. And it's not a funny story, but that's how life works sometimes, So then, a few years later, I'm on the Chicago Police Department. My career starts. And I went on to have this career with Chicago Police Department that I'm very proud of. I'm excited to have had the opportunity to do. I kind of got to do my dream job, and it played out better than I could have hoped, really. And without question, I think Brian Liturgy could tell you, my brothers could tell you, anybody who's been in my life in this linear kind of space from July 1st of 1987 to now will tell you that Sergeant Walter Kevin Artz and Deputy Mike McKissick played a big part in who I am and what I became as a policeman and as a detective with Chicago Police Department. So I decided to share that story with you guys. I hope I didn't take too long and bore you with it. I mean, it is about Sergeant Artz. His name is on the wall of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty in Washington, D.C. I've been there. I've seen it. I'm proud that I was there to see it. His wife passed away, unfortunately, but his daughters are alive and well. As far as I know, I've had no contact with them. I wish them the very best. I hope they know what a great man their father was, how much respect I have for him, and how much he meant to me, And you could make the argument. I wouldn't put all this stuff I didn't do right on him or Mike, but you could certainly make the argument that whatever good I did as a policeman, as a homicide detective of Chicago Police Department, that Mike McKissick and Sergeant Artz had fibers into that. So I think that's that story, really. Oh, I did talk to, I want to mention her, Mike McKissick's widow, Dorothy McKissick, was kind enough to speak to me. I just kind of reached out blindly. I tried to reach out to everybody, but I just couldn't get connected with the other people involved. And if they hear this, my apologies. My email address is on the podcast. It's real simple, mike@detectivestory.net. Please reach out. I'd love to talk to you. If I got something wrong here, I will make it right in the podcast to both of the Arts. I've done this partially for you. But Dorothy McKissick, she was very sweet in talking to me and telling me a lot about Mike because I just kind of wanted to fill in the blanks. I knew him for a summer. He was good to me. I knew that, frankly, his career didn't end on a particularly high note. Unfortunately, nothing, that he did to disgrace the badge at all. It's the way things go sometimes. He was a good man and a hell of a good policeman and served our country proudly and bravely. But he retired, I think, sooner than he would have liked, according to Dorothy. But in asking her, could you just tell me a little bit more about him? Because, he seems, I knew him for a short time and he was pretty stern at first, but he came on and she told me some fun things. She said that he was kind of a stern guy. A lot of people looked at him as that kind of hard-edged policeman, but he was also capable of great empathy and compassion. She told me a great story about a woman who worked in the sheriff's department there inside after he hadn't been there very long. Her grandfather, or her father or grandfather, I'm sorry, had served in the military, and she wanted the flag from his funeral, and she didn't know quite how to get it. Mike, who's a member of the VFW and a couple of other veterans groups, not only got it for her, but got it framed at his expense and took it into her. And Dorothy told me the woman was just overcome with emotion. So that tells you a lot about the character of the man, right? Another great story on a different level. She was telling me a story of how, this urban legend, take it what it is. She's his wife, so she's hearing these stories from people like me, telling them in bars, whatever. But it's still a great story. She said that there's a little town outside Terre in Vigo County called Sealyville. I guess there was a bar there that was known to kind of be a little bit rough. And there was a fight. There was a big kind of brawl there. And she said that Mike is the closest one there, and he gets there. He goes in, and there's people shoving and punching and stuff in the thing. And he kind of like in the old movies, he stops the music and he slams his billy club down on the bar so loud that everybody stops and looks at him. And she said, forgive my language, but she says, he tells him, you assholes, any of you assholes aren't out of here in 15 seconds or going with me. She said when the policeman who told her the story, the other policemen were pulling up to assist them, she said all they saw was people streaming out, and they were worried that something happened to him, but they all stream out. They get in, he's standing at the bar, talking with the bartender, billy club in hand, so it's a fun story. That's really all I got. It's about Sergeant Artz. Again, I've made this about me and talking about Mike a lot, but I do these shows, as you know by now, probably, so that the names aren't forgotten, and Sergeant Artz should never be forgotten for his service. So thank you again for letting me tell this story and hearing me out. I appreciate it. As always, I appreciate you guys checking in. We'll get a lot of stuff coming up. I got Kira, my editor, is working her tail off. We'll have a lot of stuff out for you soon. I hope you're enjoying it. Please let us know. Give us a comment. Give us a review. We appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other. I'll see you soon.